That is to ensure that this process of ratification takes place quickly, not only is being set in motion, but also carried out quickly, and that the legal foundations are prepared so that we will be amongst the first to ratify. I know that we enjoy, and I'm very grateful for that we enjoy the great support from the members of the Bundestag here. And we hope that in so doing, we will also...
Top of the agenda, the application for membership from Finland and from Sweden. Accompanying her virtually from Brussels is Jens Stoltenberg, NATO Secretary General, who you can see there. Now, we're expecting questions from the press.
Does cyber attacks or violates the airspace or whatever there could be as a possibility? Thank you.
To me, or...
No, go ahead, go ahead.
Their decision-making processes without trying to interfere or to give them advice. We respect their decisions regardless of what the conclusions will be. Then on Turkey, yes, and also that Finland and Sweden qualify for a membership. They are by far our closest partners, have worked with NATO for many years. So if Finland and Sweden apply, Euro-Atlantic area. I have been in contact with Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu. He was attending the meeting yesterday evening, and I expect that we will be able to follow up quickly if Finland and Sweden applies for a membership. When it comes to Russia, of course we are monitoring closely. We are following very closely Russia's behavior along our borders in the vicinity of NATO territory, and as a reaction, cyber attacks against any NATO allied countries. Then let me add that we are also aware that Finland and Sweden are, of course, concerned about the interim period from accession. All the national parliaments have ratified the accession protocol. We will try to speed up that process as much as possible. Many allies have stated that they will find fast tracks, as for instance Germany has indicated that this can go quite fast. In the region, in the Baltic region, in and around Finland and Sweden, of course in close consultation and based on agreement with Finland and Sweden.
Ganz kurz zum ersten Teil der Frage, der an mich gerichtet war.
Operation where you don't necessarily read form papers that have been prepared, but allows for a free-flowing debate where you can exchange your points of views. Thus, I don't want to share in detail with you
man zueinander gekommen ist. Es hat auch direkte Gespräche. Das ist ja bereits bekannt. Sitzen wir ja dort nur als Stellvertreterin für Millionen Menschen in unseren Ländern, für Millionen Europäerinnen und für den transatlantischen Raum, die sich nichts sehnlicher wünschen als weiterhin.
We're having just a few technical problems with the sound here.
Or surrounded by NATO countries. So that's an important strategic shift, also with the air defences in the further north as well. Finland has a very advanced These are important.
Yeah, and I think one commentator said it would actually make the Baltic Sea seem like an inner lake for the NATO territories. The Turkish issue hasn't really been addressed by Annalena Baerbock, but do you think that's going to be a
Sweden and Finland would deal with people that Turkey alleged to be terrorists, so people linked to the PKK, the Kurdistan Workers' Party.
There are sanctions in place as well, aren't there?
Yeah, that's an EU, but it's been designated as a terrorist group by the European Union.
Believes Russia has lost a third of its ground forces it used to invade the country. The latest report from the Ministry of Defence claims that Moscow's offensive has lost momentum and fallen behind schedule. The assessment is in stark contrast to briefings coming from the Kremlin, which...
It's hard to believe that anyone still survives in the ruins of Azovstal, an incendiary bombardment raining fire down on the last Ukrainian defenders. But hundreds, maybe even more than 1,000 fighters are thought
Our flat was destroyed by 2 impacts. These were either shells or bombs. Everything got burnt to the ground. Nearly a month we used to live in the basement, and then we decided to sneak to a Ukrainian-controlled area. We don't recognise
an entire battalion wiped out over just a couple of days. It's led British military intelligence to claim Russia has now lost a third of the forces they used to launch this invasion. But in this war, you get a very different picture.
But since the challenge was thrown, we, of course, accepted it. We are no strangers to sanctions. They were almost always there in one form or another. What is surprising is the absolutely cavernous Russophobic surge that has occurred in all.
North Korea has reported another 15 deaths from what it called fever as it confronts the spread of coronavirus. Further 300,000 cases of the fever were recorded on Sunday. The state news agency admitted the population lacked awareness, coverage in the population, and a warning a waning pandemic. As of Sunday, officials will stop sending out invitations for vaccinations, although another programme will be launched in the autumn. Vaccination rates in adults stand at 90% now. Profits in the first quarter of this year as oil prices surge in the wake of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Saudi Aramco, which is the world's most valuable company, has reported a net income of $39.5 billion so far this year. News from me and the team. See you soon.
देश के हर पल में कल आज और कल में देश के हर पल कभी परछाई बनके कभी विश्वास बनके दिल में साहस का एहसास बनके उम्मीदों को सच्चा है इंडिया अमूल दूध पीता है इंडिया.
One person can cause an effect. One person in HR can challenge outdated hiring practices, champion modern benefits, advocate impact, and cause the effect you wish to see in the workplace today.
He's been called the Trump of the tropics, with views many see as racist and sexist. But Brazil's president faces old rival, the former president Lula da Silva, in an epic battle for re-election.
Acho que o problema do Brasil tem resolve com arma.
And these women could be the kingmakers.
Que elas são o voto.
I want to talk to you about the politics of this. Did she not think she was going to get that question?
It's important to remember that this is a negotiation.
It's a good photo of.
I have an opportunity to create chaos.
There is always an email.
On BBC World News. This is BBC World News with the latest news and results from around the globe. Sport today.
Loss of Australian all-rounder Andrew Symonds, who died at the age of 46. Could the quadruple dream become a reality? Liverpool remain on course after claiming the FA Cup for the first time in... Hello, welcome to Sport Today, and we start with that sad news that former Australia cricketer Andrew Symonds has died after being involved in a car crash. Cricket Australia has said it was shocked and saddened by the nearly 200 one-day internationals and 14 T20s between 1998 and 2009. He won 2 over World Cups and he was part of Australia's Ashes winning side in 2006-07. He also played county New Zealand state team in 1994, scoring more than 5,000 runs, as well as taking more than 100 wickets.
I was thinking on the way in how many of the current Australian men's and women's team that grew up with his post. Didn't necessarily have to be cricket fans, they were just lovers of all things Australia, which he represented.
Andrew Simons, who's died aged 46. Now, Liverpool 6-5 on penalties. A repeat, of course, of the result in this season's League Cup final. Our sports correspondent Nesta McGregor watched the action at Wembley.
150 years since the first FA Cup final, and it's Liverpool forced into a substitution, and it was a key player, top scorer Mo Salah. A goalless first half, and after the break Chelsea settled. They came closest to getting on the score sheet when, from a free kick, Marcos Alonso grazed the. So when Mason Mount missed, a successful Liverpool spot kick would win it.
Here's Simicas. Liverpool's hero!
Honestly, I think it was the toughest game I've played this season, but we respect it. It's normal because it's final. And we have 2 more cups to go. We will see.
Liverpool have the FA Cup.
So Liverpool's second trip to Wembley this season, and the second time.
That later today. But a busy day in the Premier League too, seeking to move 6 points clear at the top of the table. Manchester City are in action right now at West Ham. It's currently goalless there after just over 21 minutes. And earlier, Tottenham...
The message is it can be a bit repetitive, but it's important to repeat because we all have to remember the situation, and we also have to remember that every opponent's different. They give you different problems come match day, so there's some things, basics that we need to keep the same, which I think at the minute is work ethic and the attitude.
In all competitions since 2020. As Dortmund finished runners-up to champions Bayern Munich, the Norway international will join Manchester City ahead of next season in a multi-million-pound deal, reportedly worth hundreds of millions. They beat Atalanta, and Coppa Italia winners Inter failed to win against Cagliari later in the day.
I'm sure that my players are feeling exactly like I am feeling right now. They are focused and motivated. We will get on.
Looking at it from the athlete's perspective, all athletes go through a lot of things, and it just gives a little more insight on the athlete's mind and how we handle different things.
And we've seen,
might not deal with the things the same way if the same situation happens to them, and you never know how it affects you mentally.
And from yourself, Maurice, when you were competing, were you aware of sort of the?
Yeah, I think we suppressed it a lot. It really wasn't to the forefront of anything. And then if somebody would say something, they'd be like, "Oh, this person is just weak." When it's really not being.
Keep achieving and keep striving forward. And how did that impact your mental health too?
Yeah, it's always the pressure, especially being in America where, and in a sport to where we're all fighting for. It's not something that's new to them. But after you do it 4 or 5 times, then they'll start to be like, "Oh man, this is great." Even though what I've done was great, but there's always that pressure on you to do better and to do more.
Friday, the hottest part of Pakistan made it to 51 on Saturday. May well be the peak of it because the worst of this heat is going to be moderating just a touch over the next couple of days before building back again later in the week ahead. Now, of course, it's Central Asia here. It's looking dry and temperatures are set to be heading upwards as we go through the coming days. Here, as we look towards Afghanistan and Pakistan, northwest India, again, the worst of that intense heat just easing a touch, though. Temperatures staying at or above average. Although occasional moments of drier, brighter weather coming through here. That's your temperature trend into Tashkent. That's it for now. I'll see you again soon.
At global disease threats and innovations in medicine. These girls are benefiting from a vaccine which is offered routinely in wealthier countries. I first became aware of this new coronavirus in early 2020. This has been such a fast. This vaccine could be. It was a privilege to be able to film the very first volunteers to receive one of the vaccines during the trials. It is science we have to thank for giving us this route out of the pandemic. Coronavirus.
Reparations.
Join me, Laura Trevelyan, for Grenada, a journey to confront the past on BBC World News.
After facing down the pandemic, can the global travel industry recover, or will rising costs, lack of staff and continued lockdowns
From e-commerce, new developments and products to gadgets and games, and for everyone interested in the internet, analyze business and personal life. It's Click.
Asteroid climbing robot.
You survived though?
Just about, yeah. Also, Paul is building a new home in space.
It's only 99% sure I'm a person.
Oi, on your bike or not?
Yes, how do you make cycling safer?
Here's a... Everything that we use comes from planet Earth. Now, some of those resources, rare, precious metals, for example, are really useful for scientific and climate research. And what are we going to live on?
So as humans, we've been exploiting the resources on Earth for as long as we've been around, but instead of looking down now at what's underneath our feet, we're starting to look up and see what else is out there.
Ultimately, what we are looking at doing is going to an asteroid, landing on it, taking samples.
Hard.
The grippers that they use are essentially derived from ultimately things like gecko pads, and if you look at like the ends of tarantulas' feet and all the little hairs that they have, that's how a spider is able to climb the wall. It's got quite a bit of force to it, so
In Japan, the Asteroid Mining Corporation need to find the right asteroid to mine. Now, that's done by looking at the chemical composition of meteorites to identify what their parent bodies, in this case asteroids, are made of.
A concentration of platinum in one of our meteorites, then we can certainly tell the AMC guys, okay, the types of meteorites that we're finding platinum in are likely to come from this type of asteroid. So now it's over to you.
And you know, these days we can actually go one better than just waiting for space debris. The UK's National Space Centre in Leicester is at the centre of the universe. Well, that's what they tell me anyway. So let's hit their planetarium for a quick recap on one of the most daring space rock missions so far. The asteroid belt is this ring of bits and bobs that orbits the Sun further out than Mars. But that's not where all the asteroids are. If we fly back towards the Hayabusa 2, this audacious mission successfully flew to Ryugu, blew a hole in it, and brought samples back to Earth.
So we thought before the landing that it was one mine on Earth.
It could take decades before anyone successfully pulls off asteroid mining, which, considering there are only a few protections in place for the preservation of space, means that hungry pioneers...
A home to humans since the year 2000, with 7 researchers on board at any time. And our interplanetary population is set to grow, as private firms also compete to put more...
Micrometeorite hit the structure at 8 kilometers a second. So we want to make it safer for astronauts. So we are using graphene, which is 200 times stronger than steel. This is the model we are working on.
Shown here as a sheet or a...
More space within the habitat, especially when they're living there for months or years, they need as much as space they can get.
And you only need something, one atom, to get those benefits?
We only need one atom.
It's a magic material.
Mini model
increases the strength of the final material.
That's correct.
This collaborative robot is designed to improve efficiency and safety.
If you hold, something is hold here, this machine is stop.
Which is of space.
Small defect in the structure, that's where the crack could start.
It's only 99% sure I'm a person.
The flexible material is then set at around 170 degrees, this of lunar landscapes.
Transporting material from Earth to the Moon and Mars is very expensive, so really what we want to do is utilise as much resources in situ as possible.
Aled's already made bricks with binders like egg albumen,
It's just going to be a nightmare.
so human blood has been used in these experiments.
In some ways it seems, quite feasible, but it would probably also damage the health of the astronaut.
That one says urea on it. Now, is that...
Up to 3 times stronger?
One of the most viable concretes comes from a byproduct of space food.
We know we'll probably feed astronauts on the Moon and Mars with algae just because it's so efficient, so we could potentially produce construction materials.
Its byproducts could become the building blocks of the future. And as for graphene homes knitted by robots, you'll have to watch this space.
The most spacious and supremely comfortable BMW 3 Series Grand Limousine. Welcome to the grand side of thrill.
Hello, I'm Ross Atkins with Outside Source. This is the extraordinary...
Ross Atkins, Outside Source on BBC World News.
Homes and buildings are being built hype. For now, it's still mostly with good old brick and mortar, laid by skillful bricklayers.
But this home right here isn't being built by humans. It's being built by that thing.
At a rate of 3 bricks per minute. That's compared to your average experienced human bricklayer, like Simon here, who would lay down 4 per minute. So it still needs to catch up a little bit. But that's not forgetting machines don't get tired and don't need regular. The UK's first home being built by a robot bricklayer will be.
Now, not every brick is made equally. They all differ a little bit in size. And so the robot houses sensors to analyze each individual one. An algorithm finds and load it.
We started on this journey 5 years ago. We didn't initially expect it to take so long, but there are many complexities for getting a machine to work with standard bricks, blocks and mortar. The mortar is particularly a challenge. Attractive to students. So with a robot, you can build a house with a tablet rather than a trowel.
Right, now it's time to take on the machine. Yeah, I've never laid bricks before, but have faith in me more than I have in myself. So thank you. And go. I dropped the mortar, sorry. What if I cheat a little? Hold on, let me do 2. That's it, see? I did 2 at once. Is it done?
We've lost water at the top again, so we've done at 8, I'm afraid.
Then I've won. So one thing the robot can't do is refill itself, can it? The brick don't fit. Hold on. Right, push all these along.
Well, is really impressive. But remember, it's still a bulky piece of kit. And against Simon here, who can do 4 bricks per minute, it's still a tad slow. There's also more and more 3D printed
laying, tiling, insulation.
Well, just the heavy superstructure where there's a physically demanding work, and the machine with its lasers and its sensors can bring a level of measurement that a human can't do.
I'm shifting the brick. I can't even shift the... Have I ruined this house? Yes.
Omar beating a bot there, all in a day's work at Click. Now, as we rethink how we build our cities, how we move through
and enter. It is of course more visible and more necessary at night time, but the box is also collecting data on any cars that do enter that zone in the hopes that it'll be able to create a map of a safer city for cyclists.
Borderline terrifying or just very unsafe. If we present that back to cyclists when they're next taking a route across London or any city in the world, we can highlight where those unsafe areas on their route are. That can be everything from avoid these
Tether's ultrasound sensors collect data 30 times a second to differentiate cars and trucks from other bikes.
Do you think for cyclists, seeing where the danger is on the road could actually put them off cycling, which of course isn't what you want?
We hope that the places.
Whilst these lasers light up vulnerable cyclists at night, in future these devices could also go on helmets or backpacks, helping users communicate in different ways.
Looking at audio feedback as well.
Month, it will soon cover more ground, and a wider launch is expected for later this year. It's of course not the only project pushing pedal power though. In the US, Nick Webb.
To change how we live in our cities. Researchers here are focused on improving urban design, mobility, and ultimately reducing carbon emissions.
We are getting used to like ordering an Uber and it's downstairs like in 5 minutes, right? How we want to bring the same convenience to mobility modes that are more environmentally friendly.
They've invented an autonomous bicycle and a PEV, which stands for Persuasive Electric Vehicle. The idea being they will persuade you to ride own way around campus.
Everyone has like different prototypes going around campus, so some people would look at it, others like wouldn't even realize that that's an experiment.
The vehicles could connect with public transit and be used for the first and last mile of journeys. And when
mean anything anymore, we think about what might be beyond smart cities. We're looking at ways to increase the social performance, the economic performance, and the environmental performance of cities.
The commute is in their crosshairs.
And half the space would double the functionality. You've cut the embodied energy and the use energy in half. You've cut the CO2 emissions in half.
But how many of us really dream of living in smaller homes?
Exactly what you want to do in the community which improves the economic performance. So in our mind, it's a win-win if you can focus on these hyperlocal solutions to global problems.
The big brains here are seriously thinking about our future, developing possible solutions.
अमूल चीज ये मेरा चीज है.
Hello, it's time now for our latest look around the world of weather. We'll start off in North America, and low pressure is moving its way eastwards across Canada. You see the swirl of cloud on the satellite picture here. As it does so, it's bringing an east-west split in temperatures this week for many western and central parts, well above average, to the east at or below average. Turning warmer through Morocco, northern Algeria, where it's still on the cool side in Libya and Egypt, really becoming very warm in Cape Town here. Heavy rain in places, and the worst of that intense heat in Pakistan, northwest India, will be moderating over the next couple of days before worsening again later in the week. This part of China will see some further rain or showers, and it really is on the cool side here in Hong Kong at around 18 degrees Celsius, so northern China is warming up. And into Australia, still a few showers around Queensland, New South Wales, nowhere near as wet as it's been. It's wet and windy at times into Tasmania. We are seeing some weather systems moving northwards through New Zealand. Bit of a gap.
As we face the world's greatest environmental challenges, what we need most is solutions. Our new website, Future Planet, brings you stories of the people who are working to make the world a sustainable place and reduced carbon footprint. Future Planet, solutions for a sustainable world.
In a mass shooting in Buffalo. Kurdish militants, while Russia has called the move a mistake. Well, in the past hour, NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg gave an address via video link from Brussels.
Turkey has made it clear, so if Finland and Sweden applies, that we can welcome them to our alliance in a quick and speedy process.
How long would it take to ratify Finland and Sweden to become full members of NATO?
Very quickly, but it will vary a bit from country to country, and of course I cannot guarantee on behalf of 30 independent parliaments in 30 allied countries. But we speak about months, and allies are really eager to do this as fast. Then in the interim period, we are in close contact with Finland and Sweden, and we are prepared to also address their security concerns in that interim period for NATO allies.
Jens Stoltenberg, a longer version of that interview will be here on BBC News later. Well, also at today's meeting was the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken. He had this to say.
Allies were joined here in Berlin by the Foreign Minister would strongly support a NATO application by either Sweden or Finland, should they choose to formally apply to the alliance. We'll respect whatever decision they make. And we've long supported NATO's open door policy and the right of all countries.
Report from the Ministry of Defence claims Moscow's offensive has lost momentum and fallen behind schedule. The assessment is in stark contrast to briefings coming from the Kremlin, which have consistently painted the invasion as making steady progress. BBC's Joe Inwood is in Lviv.
It's the Donbass where most of the troops are focused. The town they're going for, or a city indeed, is Severodonetsk. This is one of the last cities that the Ukrainians hold on the east side of the Sovietsky Donetsk River. And it was the attempt to encircle this which led to the terrible, terrible losses that the Russians experienced a few days ago. I'm sure viewers may have seen the satellite imagery and the drone shots showing about 70 to 80 armoured vehicles, an entire battalion's worth, wiped out. British MOD having this assessment that you referred to earlier. A huge number of their ground forces, a third of them they reckon, have been destroyed, and it's these failed attempts to make these river crossings, these costly attacks gone wrong, focused in the Donbass now, that has led...
Live streamed the killings. He's suspected of being a white supremacist. Neda Taufik reports from New York.
A busy grocery store in a predominantly black community. This was the shooter's intended target. The horror started being killed in cold blood in the store was streamed live online. The suspect was taken into custody alive after putting his gun to his neck and threatening to shoot himself. He's been identified as an 18-year-old white male and has been charged with was racially motivated.
We are investigating this incident as both a hate crime and a case of racially motivated violent extremism.
A white supremacist who has engaged in
terms with the fact that a toxic mix of guns and racism has ended their neighbors' lives in an instant. Neda Taufik, BBC News, New York.
More on all those stories, of course, online, bbc.com/news. Coming up next, risk and reward, Europe's China gamble. Stay with us.
Hello. After hitting 50 degrees Celsius on some wet weather around here, we will continue to do that as we look at the forecast going into Monday, also into parts of Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Worth noting that in northeast India and into Assam in particular, looking particularly wet with a risk of flooding. Now, through much of northwest India, again, the worst of that intense heat just easing a touch, though. Temperatures staying at or above average for the time of year and building higher again later in the week. So the rain across southern parts of India and into Sri Lanka, a few showers
खुश है ये आसमां ज़मीन हर तरफ छाए हैं हम Amul Cool, chill your dill.
Welcome to Click. We're outside again. Sensors to track dangerous hotspots.
The robots are operating like a swarm of bees would.
Good luck to be a cyborg. We might be able to stop or even reverse the aging process.
I've just sat here and controlled things with my brain.
It's like technology telekinesis, isn't it?
The
range changing the world.
London to Paris in half an hour.
Touchless coffee, driverless cars. You can virtually try on clothes.
Can we take it for a spin? That's Click on BBC World News.
Argy James Wong for Follow the Food on BBC World News.
As Russia's hit with growing Western sanctions over its attack on Ukraine, it wants a peaceful solution in Europe, where it's been investing in huge projects. Now on BBC World News Europe, correspondent Nick Beake investigates.
Europe has emerged from the pandemic building bridges and investing where others won't.
China was the only interested party for a huge port in the Mediterranean at the time.
As Beijing widens its gateway to this continent, there are warnings. It all comes to governments. But who's really benefiting from this modern-day Silk Road?
We cannot be driven out by some investment without being asked about it.
How much should Europe gamble on China, where the red of the Communist Party is leaving its mark?
The Chinese company treats us terribly. They do not respect us.
We tracked down this Vietnamese man who said he'd paid
us to work more, but they did not provide enough supplies. There are 20 or 30 workers living together in each container. They treat us like slaves.
After 5 months, he quit his job. But the father of 3 was stranded. Is that he has now managed to return home, but only after taking out a $2,000 loan. This is the Linglong tire factory where he worked. The tire company didn't respond to our messages.
Serbia's president has said the allegations of the mistreatment of workers, Vietnamese workers.
This is the most visible case of labor exploitation we had in the country so far.
Human rights groups say it's a warning as Chinese business expands further into Europe.
If you're actually having Chinese companies coming to other countries and
as a true friend, doesn't matter what kind of pressure or different type of influences, nothing can change our friendship of steel.
Investment in their country.
I think investments are good, whether they are from China or, I don't know, European Union, USA, so on.
I'm pro-EU, I suppose. I don't know. And of course, clean air and fresh water and everything that comes along.
Greece is emerging from the shadows of the financial crisis more than a decade ago. Its economy among the fastest growing in the
tons of goods which will then be dispatched to all corners of Europe. And this is a crucial gateway to the continent for China. But the expansion of this port is controversial.
Yanulu has lived in Piraeus all her life. The lawyer is now suing the port over unchecked dredging of the seabed, toxic pollution and other environmental damage.
Everyone is against this work because it will...
Over safety concerns. Watch the containers on the right. A narrow escape. But last year, another worker, Dimitris Daglis, died in a separate crane accident.
I don't think so. I think that in the system we are living in, the idea of win-win is an illusion. I don't think that, right now, the employer can win at the same time with the worker, when they are exploiting our strength so that we produce all this wealth.
Greece's foreign minister says although a European buyer would have been preferable, the port will be a success for both Beijing and Athens.
The truth is that China took over Piraeus, and now Piraeus is one of the biggest ports in Europe, and if what they say is true, and is substantial. So having said that, on our economic relations, I think both parties benefit. China has an entry point for its products to the European Union, especially to the Balkans and to the Central and Eastern Europe, and we have a big...
If you look at Greece's rich history, it's full of strategic alliances.
We're leaving Greece and heading to a former Yugoslavia EU membership. But it's China lending the cash for this, the country's first motorway, a complex project which European experts had claimed was not feasible.
Years late, no one else is using it. Well, apart from these guys.
Including potentially the important port of Bar.
We'll take a look. This is as far as Montenegro's flagship infrastructure project extends to today. For now, yes, it is a road to
China.
I would not say that Chinese investments are by default, dodgy. The key for the European, Union when it comes to the countries like Montenegro is to insist on a full application of the laws. That kind of insistment, that kind of supporting the...
Montenegro's new government hopes the deal will not bankrupt the country. But those who've had to deal with the legacy of it also urge caution.
We need investments. If the China is the only one interested in investing in you, yeah, I say go for it, but just be...
From Montenegro to a fellow former Yugoslav country that has turned to the West. But it's Beijing built, down to the last bolt. The tender from the Chinese state-owned company was 20% cheaper than its nearest competitor. European rivals called foul, but couldn't stop the
Chinese investment and big infrastructure projects. And so as China's modern-day Silk Road expands in its many forms, individual European countries will need to weigh up risk and reward on a case-by-case basis.
We asked 5 Chinese ambassadors in Europe for an interview about Beijing's vision for the continent, but none was available. China has declared a
कभी परछाई बनके कभी विश्वास बनके दिल में साहस का एहसास बनके उम्मीदों को सच्चाई के रंग से सजाते हैं मुश्किलें कोई हरदम
that nowhere is safe.
Страшно, когда мины летят, кто его знает, там в огороде у нас взрывалось. И этот свист еще до сих пор в ушах.
The great festival of Kumela on the River Ganges to spending months embedded with communities in Iran and Iraq. Award-winning photographers and photojournalists reveal the secrets of their trade. My greatest shot.
If you pay attention enough, a still image can tell a whole story.
I believe that great stories take time.
My name's Jordan Banks. I'm a travel and documentary photographer. Shoot regularly for tourist boards. I shoot for magazines. I've tried to sort of find myself a little niche in the market in that schemes, just working out what the colours of a place are, pre-visualising images in terms of where I want to be, where the sun's rising, where the sun's setting, all these different things so I know where I want to be, basically. You do everything you can and then hopefully something comes together. I mean, more often than not it doesn't pay off, but then it's those times it does pay off, it makes it worth it. To be a travel photographer, ducks or rocks or something to give me some, you know, I'd have my scene in front of me that I know I roughly want, and I just want some foreground interest, something to make the composition really work. No matter how much research you can do, you can't really tell the little things that are going to make for great pictures. You could do it the other way around as well. Instead of just having a horizon in the middle, basically, that's the main thing you want to try and avoid. You've then got the side grid, so if you've got a point of interest, so whether that's a rock, a tree, a river, you want to try and put that on one of the thirds, going the vertical thirds, so not, again, not right in the middle. Probably one of my biggest compositional tricks to really get the most out of my images is the use of lead-in lines. And that's just any element in the landscape, whether it be man-made or natural, that you can use to just draw the viewer through the image. I'll look for different elements in the landscape, natural elements, man-made elements, whatever it might be in my location. So I'm using two different sort of lead-in lines in this shot. So I'm using, as you see, the fence down here to the left is my original lead-in line. It's actually quite nice. Fences work really well. And that's then bringing my viewer in, hopefully, into this way, so from the left. And then my path meanders you through and takes you through so you see the whole picture. More time viewing it, and they've really taken in every element of it rather than just going, oh, that's a nice picture of that person, and then moving on to the next one. You know, if you're trying to sell images to market them, the tourist boards, countries, any sort of travel brochure, magazines, they want an image that's going to stand out on their shelf. Expected. Once you get 100 million people anywhere, and a hit on attack on your senses, I guess, you couldn't really comprehend it at all until you see it. I tried to find out what you should do on this day and how you should be there. And you could get boats to go into the river as they sort of come in. What I wanted. Just at dawn, we arrive at the banks of the Ganges where they meet, and yeah, I was right in the middle of it. I was in the mix with all. You know, he was just celebrating. He just wanted to be involved in it. I fired off, what, 5 or 6 images, and that's it. The moment's gone. It's the prime image of what I wanted to come there. I wanted to have people on the holiest day of the year celebrating, and I wanted to have those immediately just because it's kind of nothingness to it, really. It's getting better now, the arm's raised. His face, you can see his mouth here has not really got the look I'm looking for. As soon as his mouth opens, that's that real celebration. You also see the light as sort of his arms moved. So you can see the light, and it'd be really, really minor changes. I tend to just play with the colour profiles first. If I've got a preset that will do it for me, then I tend to just use that profile. More than anything, just to see what they'll do. So if I was just giving it a little bit more saturation. So in the technical terms of the composition, I'd say it sort of breaks all the rules in terms of the fact that his head or face is right in the centre of the image, which is, you know, traditionally it should be in the top corners. And again, the whole shot is sort of centralised. It has got sort of lead-in lines here, but they're not really lead. Pops and allows the orange and allows his face and eye line to really pop. This is capturing a moment in time that needs to be seen rather than worrying about getting everything perfect. It's just that raw motion. For me, that's what's always exposed. You know, as long as you can see what's going on and it can get that feeling across to the viewer, that's what a good photograph is to me. It's just capturing that real moment in time where it all came together. It was really well received. I wanted to tell the story so that in 10, 15, 20, 30, whatever it might be, 50 years, someone could find my work and still get an idea of what this festival was, even though that no image will ever do it justice, really, to be honest.
One person can cause an effect. One person in HR can advocate for pay equity and turn jobs into careers. HR empowers others to not only dream of change, but to create it. The actions of a few affect the lives of many. Join SHRM's global HR community to make
I've been focusing on slow travel and sort of long-form photojournalism for about 6 or 7 years now, and it's taken me through Iraq and Iran and Afghanistan and for much of the Middle East. The focus really has always been on culture. Over the past few years, I've walked probably close to 1,000 kilometers through Iraq, and I believe that that was the most successful way of learning about culture and heritage and the stories people have. When you walk and you meet people as you go, and people join you on these pathways and through mountains and across rivers, there's a relationship that's formed that allows you to access stories that you would otherwise not be able to do. I think a strong example of how I work, and this was an enormous journey for me to join with a group of people I'd never met before and a very, very close-knit family, and so I walked the full migration with them. Abul Faiz was a particularly stoic shepherd, and on one of the days he had said to his uncle, whose sheep he was looking after, "Don't worry, we don't need to count them. I'm sure we've got all of them." And each sheep is worth a couple of $100 and is the entire livelihood of this family. And when we got to the top, to the highest altitude, these sheep. And I was allowed into that space to photograph him in his most vulnerable and distressed moments with invitation. He didn't mind that I was there. And that's what happens when you stay longer.
My parents built this tree house, and at the time we didn't use it very much, which my mother reminds me of a lot. But now it's become a little sanctuary, an editing suite. You go off on this assignment, you're completely immersed in the lives of others and the stories that you're sharing. And then I kind of come back home, and then I got total solitude.
I love coming up here on my own. Take very long walks, historically. Yeah, this is my kind of safe place. Yeah, and then bouts of extreme lows. So you have a very intense understanding of the spectrum of human emotion. And I think I've really benefited from being able to reach. I know what -10 and +10 feels like.
Private, you know, she's not somebody that just talks freely about these things, because a lot of it's been incredibly traumatic as well. So she has to pick her moment. And, you know, it's quite a hard thing to witness. And I hope you're okay.
Don't.
Don't.
That's very sweet.
South of Baghdad, in a town called Wasit, I was told to go and visit a family and stay with them to hear some of their stories about their community. And in this family, because as you imagine, if you're rowing or taking an engine, the hair is flying about the place. So they taught me how to plait my hair for the first time ever properly. And the following morning, an age where it's not seen as respectful to be photographed on camera. There are certain boundaries within conservative communities that have to be respected. And so I was trying to make their experience as positive as possible, because they felt very left out, that they couldn't be a part. The girls photographed me first. So you can see here they're getting used to the focus. And the girl that took this photograph is one of the girls that wasn't allowed to be in the group picture. She felt really excited to get a bit bored with the idea that you're there, you know, sort of a bit over it. And by this time, I think they were reasonably over it. I love post. So I'm adding some exposure and I'm following it down the arm. It's not much, but it does change the image a lot. So here she's actually almost the start of the image as you follow it down the line. And then they can lead the viewer. You maybe mess it up or it goes really well. And I just had my big one and I didn't mess it up. I I know I can do my job. And that was a big shift. You know, for example, this image is one of my first ever photos. You know, if I had Julie's wish, it would be that I was invisible. You know, I'd absolutely love to just be a fly on the wall. You know, immersing yourself in the lives of others is only so that you can then remove yourself again. My career has changed in the respect that I'm
Dynamic, androgynous, he's now at the forefront of a new generation of progressive choreographers who are drawing new audiences to contemporary dance.
It is just extraordinary. Whatever their method, they only had one.
Hello, it's time now for our latest look around the world of weather. We'll start off in North America, and low pressure is moving its way eastwards across Canada. You see the swirl of cloud on the satellite picture here. As it does so, it's very warm. So cooler, cloudier day in Montreal with some showers moving through during Sunday, and a trailing weather front into this part of the USA with some strong to severe thunderstorms, very gusty winds. Got low pressure just sitting off the east coast of Argentina, well above average to the east at or below average. Turning warmer through Morocco, northern Algeria, where it's still on the cool side in Libya and Egypt, really becoming very warm in Cape Town here. Into the Middle East, and where we've seen strong winds at times through parts of Singapore, worsening again later in the week. This part of China will see some further rain or showers, and it really is on the cool side here in Hong Kong at around 18 degrees Celsius, though northern China is warming up. And into Australia, still a few showers around Queensland, New South Wales the week ahead. Bye-bye.
I understand the consequences of my decision. And one of the consequences of my decision was not going to Australia, and I was prepared not to go.
Journalists are under attack in ways that we've never...
We start at Wimbledon.
Stand by for a moment of history.
The headlines keep breaking.
The Winter Olympics.
Now to cricket.
The Tour de France.
The Africa Cup of Nations.
The debate keeps raging.
They're still the team to beat.
England's batting is weak.
It's going quite well.
Definitely a lot of disappointment.
The results keep BBC World News. Hello, I'm Tim Wilcox with a summary of the BBC World News. The head of NATO says Turkey has made it clear it won't block Sweden and Finland's potential bids to join the military alliance, as talks between foreign ministers end in Berlin. A NATO member has voiced its opposition, though, accusing them of sheltering Kurdish militants, while Russia has called the move a mistake. NATO Secretary-General Jens Stoltenberg spoke to me a little earlier, and this is what he had to say.
Turkey has made it clear that their intention is to welcome them to our alliance in a quick and speedy process.
Well, several NATO foreign ministers have already said that they want a rapid accession process for Finland's membership. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken was at the meeting.
Application by either Sweden or Finland, should they choose to formally apply to the alliance. We'll respect whatever decision they make. And we've long supported NATO's open door policy and the right of all countries to decide their own futures.
Our opinion polls changed overnight, and I think next week it's going to be over 80% of the population in favor. So I think we could easily call this Vladimir Putin's NATO enlargement.
Okay, so you think it'll go through? It seems certain it will go through. But what about the
Nordics, in Europe, and for the alliance as a whole?
Former Finnish Prime Minister Alexander Stubb. British military intelligence believes Russia has lost a third of the ground forces it used to invade Ukraine. The latest report from the British...
About 70 to 80 armoured vehicles, an entire battalion's worth, wiped out by artillery barrages. And it's that sort of loss which has led to the British MOD having this assessment that you referred to earlier. A huge number of their ground forces, a third of them they...
He drove more than 300 kilometres to carry out the attack in the city of Buffalo, which he live-streamed. Ukraine has won the Eurovision Song Contest with their song Stefania, which was sung in Ukrainian. Odd news.
Hello. After hitting 50 degrees Celsius on Friday, the hottest part of Pakistan made it to 51. We go through the coming days here as we look towards Afghanistan and Pakistan, northwest India. Again, the worst of that intense heat just easing a touch, though. Temperatures staying at or above average for the time of year and building higher again later in the week. The eastern portions of India and into Bangladesh in the northeast, they are more widespread here. So it will be wet at times into Dhaka. Islamabad, dry. Colombo, showers and thunderstorms, though occasional moments of drier, brighter weather coming through here.
Support from a group that might surprise you. Black and brown women who are evangelical Christians.
Ele defende a família acima de tudo, né? E Deus acima de todos.
This October he looks set to face his own.
Having a global view really makes a difference, and shining a light on stories across the world gives our viewers another perspective. I love the pressure of being live, reflecting on the world in real time.
Women and men alike feel pressured to keep up.
زدت مثلا حوالي 30 كيلو، أنا عايزة أبقى كده. هبقى زي البنت اللي في الصورة دي بالظبط.
البنت كانت عايزة نفسها إنها تبقى رفيعة. But there's a story the adverts and influencers aren't telling.
مش أطباء.
We expose flaws in outdated medical laws and regulations governing qualified doctors.
ما تقلقوش بتبص بصراحة بليزر. أكيد مش مشكلة، هنجيب لك نقطة بعيدة. مش أي وري. ولا بقى في الدنيا بقى خالص.
خدودي كانت حلوة. شايفة؟ It started after a qualified dermatologist injected dermal filler into her cheeks. أيام عرض الأزياء كنت عايزة أعمل شوية change، فقلت إن أنا أعمل بوتوكس، أعمل فيلر، أعمل حاجات. Was wrong. حسيت إن حاجة مؤلمة شوية تحت الجلد، حسيت إن في ورم، فرحت الدكتور قال لي بصي ده ممكن يكون التهاب حصل. قلت له من إيه؟ ما وضحليش. Isolated case. Thousands of women have taken to social media to highlight the dangers of beauty treatments. Dermal fillers and Botox are both substances that are injected beneath the skin. Botox paralyzes the muscle. The world are struggling to keep pace with their laws and regulations. In Egypt, it's not just qualified doctors like the one who injected Mona carrying out potentially dangerous treatments. Training centers we found online to see if we could get a certificate without a single medical qualification.
ألو؟ أنا كنت بس عاوز أعرف عن الكورسات.
Most places we called told us that only doctors were eligible.
وإيه السايد إفكتس اللي ممكن تحصل وخلي بالك من إيه؟
طب والليزر؟
الليزر مفيش مشكلة، إحنا نعرفك إزاي تتعامل مع البيشنت وإيه الدرجات اللي أنت تلعبي فيها، غير كده مفيش حاجة تانية مهمة يعني.
حضرتك في نهاية الكورس.
To do dermal filler or Botox, you must be a dermatologist or plastic surgeon registered with the Doctors Syndicate. That's the body responsible for monitoring doctors' performance and overseeing complaints made. Ashraf was offering the course to us knowing we were unqualified and wanting to use the certificate he gave us to work in the industry. There are laws in Egypt that prohibit this. ربنا يخليك.
أنت دراستك إيه؟
أنا درست علم اجتماع بصراحة.
حلو. وأنا في الفاشن.
انتوا ما عندكوش اي خبره بمسك ابره؟
لا.
لو انتوا عايزين بس
It was going to cost us 30,000 Egyptian pounds, just under $2,000 US. We met with him the next day to pay a deposit.
دول 1000 جنيه اللي بتعمل زينا. خدي بالك دي منافسه. انا طبعا انا اعتبر بزنس، انا ماليش دعوه بالقصه دي. انا في عندي حد جالي قبل كده من سوهاج او المنيا، ما شاء الله فتح سنتر كبير هناك وعلمتها في مصر.
ما كانتش دكتورة؟
لا مش دكتورة.
Beauty center called Lorenza offered something they called medical filler for the hair. From the pictures and videos, you would think that this was a miracle treatment.
بعد ما خلفت على طول حسيت ان انا مكتئبه جدا. كنت واقفه قدام المرايه يعني شايفه نفسي مش حلوه، فدخلت على الفيسبوك كنت بدور على حد بس يكون دكتور. لقيت لورينزا سبا.
كل ما تواصل معاهم يقولوا لي عادي ده طبيعي، كان شعري بيقع لوحده من غير حتى ما المسه.
In response to the complaints made on their Facebook page, Lorenza posted this message. It was later taken down, but Asma took a screen.
أنا ما كنتش أعرف.
The courts found Rahab al-Laqani had caused harm to Asma, had been impersonating a doctor, and managing the beauty center without a license. They ordered the permanent closure. Young women are under immense social pressure to achieve the perfect body shape. And among the most popular procedures worldwide, performed 1.7 million times in 2019, is liposuction. Often misunderstood to be a solution to weight loss, it is in fact a body contouring procedure where excess fat is removed from under the skin by suction.
كانت عاملة لي في يوم عيد ميلادي فيديو.
But at 105 kilograms, many doctors told Minna she was too heavy to have the operation.
الدكاترة قالوا لها وزنك وزن رجيم عادي، مالكيش في العملية. عرفت ان على العملية
يا روحي يا منى.
Amal, Minna's mother, hasn't been able to look through her daughter's things until now.
ده ايه منونة؟ ده انا مخليها عشان الوزن بتاعها كان 105. وهي بتبحث لقيت مينا ده، رحنا المركز وقلت له انا ما عنديش غيرها.
The following week
جينا يوم العمليه، جات لنا الموظفه اللي شغاله بتقرير يعني ايه اي حاجه تحصل بعد العمليه انت مالكش دعوه. ايه بقى اللي هيحصل؟ قال لي الغرز حواليها هيبقى جيب لها جلطه في البطن وجلطه على الرئه ويمضي عليها. قال لي دي عمليه هايفه، هديها التليفون تكلمك من جوه. وبعدين راح جاي مينا.
Surgical standards. Doctors the BBC spoke to said that standard practice is to remove a maximum of 5 kilograms of fat. The amount Amal told us had been removed during Minna's procedure was 1 days before Dr. Mina saw her daughter again.
دخلنا أوضة وهي تقول في حاجة ناشفة هنا هتموتني بتموتني مكان الغرز. قالت هي بتتدلع.
فاكر ان انت كده طريه ما كنتش عملتلك. طبعا هي قاعده على الكرسي المتحرك ما بتنطقش وبصله وساكته، وما هنش عليه يعمل لها اشعه ولا يكشف لها بسماعه يسمع صدرها ولا.
انا مش هتعيش، انا هفضل اديها ابر مذيبه.
We searched for Dr. Mina on Facebook. His page was no longer active. However, we found this promotional video of him on YouTube. which appears to have been posted in and American societies too. Each of them confirmed in writing to the BBC that Dr. Mina has never been registered with them. He is, however, a registered plastic surgeon with the Egyptian Doctors Syndicate, the body responsible for overseeing. We showed our evidence to more than a dozen experts in Egypt and around the world. They had very similar responses based on internationally recognized medical standards. We asked Naveen Cavalli.
Liposuction isn't something you use to lose weight, but it's more for once you've lost weight. Then yes, let's see what we can do to help.
Cosmetic liposuction it works really well, but definitely not as a first step.
حضرتك تعملي شفط يعني مثلا هيبقى كام كيلو؟
انت بتتكلمي بصي انا بتعامل مع كاتيجوري.
Dr. Mina told us the names of some of the high-profile people he claimed to have treated.
يعني انا عامل بنت بصبر وعامل
They were the same names he mentioned to Amal and Minna.
The patients need to be aware that there are advantages, disadvantages on everything. One of the most common things is anemia, bleeding, bruise.
We told the experts we understand Dr. Mina disputes Minna's mother's account and says he removed only 6 to 7 kilograms of fat from Minna's body. A couple of days after our liposuction consultation, just 1 week after she had visited him.
I will not operate on someone less than 2 weeks after meeting them for the first time.
Sometimes it takes even longer. The cooling off period is important to have the patients approved.
There is a hint.
Mona's visiting her new doctor to find out when she can have.
أنا أول حاجة دلوقتي بقالي 10 سنين لا يمكن عيان عنده حساسية على صدره أو جلده أديله فيلر.
Dr. Fuad advised that Mona could do a facelift, but that it would be a very difficult and expensive procedure. Several months before Mona would be ready for her next operation. The next step to set up our beauty clinic was the course with the Mohandes Ashraf. Our aim was to see if we could use the certificates he'd promised us to enter the Egyptian beauty industry. He offers. We asked our experts to watch what unfolded and give their opinion.
انتوا اتعاملتوا مع بيشنتس قبل كده او شفتوا ولا انتوا لسه اول مره؟
طيب الفيلم ممكن يموت؟
The answer is yes, but it's a really small chance. Injections into the wrong place can do some very serious damage, blindness, skin necrosis.
Whenever we use a filler or Botox, they're always.
الفلوس وبوصي لي وشي بقى العام مستديمه.
ايوه.
فاهماني يا ريت تموت تريحك.
طب حضرتك انت ايه رايك اللي احنا هنعمل كل الحاجات دي واحنا ما عندناش previous medical.
We went back the following day for the part of our course that would be focusing on Botox and filler.
عندي دلوقتي ايه المناطق اللي انا بحكم فيها وايه العضلات. موضوع it's very complicated. احكم فين؟
Look at when they go for this treatment.
And Mohandes Ashraf had arranged for 4 women to come and do Botox and filler treatment with us.
وعموما الدكتور اللي معايا اللي بيحاضر استاذ جراحه تجميل فيعني خليها تيجي.
Which will mean that it's actually quite painful to inject into the patient.
كشري كده اضحكي اهي بس معلش
Elsewhere in the body, allergic reactions and so forth.
بقى ايه الفيلر الفيلر بيطلع يطلع كده بس اهو خلاص.
They've been given the certificates that, when they haven't quite finished the course, which in itself has implications for how seriously they're taking the education.
It's scary. This certificate they could get and use it. Patients will not have the right information or who they are.
العيانه بتنام بتغطوا عليها بتشتغلوا تك 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 حددتوا درجه الحراره حددتوا البارامترز ده اللي يقول لك ممكن تعملي حروق ولا لا. تفتكر لسه بتوجعك هي تقول لك دكتوره ما تقولهاش لا هي تقول.
The doctors seem to be telling the trainees pretend to be a doctor. Certainly in the UK, pretending to be a doctor is a crime.
فاكر انا لما قلت لكم يا بنات بدل ما نشتري اجهزه نجيب.
About the safety goggles, he gave the model a pair to wear.
أنا عمري ما اشتغل كده مع البيشنت لازم البيشنت تبقى نايمه وانا بعمل فوكس فوقها.
Okay.
If a patient's sitting down, it's actually much more difficult to sit still. You can damage the vision permanently.
Are all over Facebook. There are no explicit laws governing laser hair removal, but there are regulations stating that only dermatologists and plastic surgeons can carry out the treatment.
الدكتور زودت الفولت بتاع الجهاز اللي بيشتغل على المكان ده حصل لي حرق في منطقة البيكيني وكنت
Like other women we had spoken to, one told us that she was concerned that her therapist was unqualified with one of the La Perle branches where there had been several complaints. We asked for a laser hair removal consultation.
في اخر سنه تقريبا معظم اللي شغالين ليزر هنا لسه في الجامعه لكن اللي بيبقى متخصص جلديه هو بيبقى ماسك شفت جلديه.
This laser technician was working without the right qualifications. The BBC has shared its findings about La Perle with the private treatment department, the body created by the Ministry of Health to monitor privately owned licensed the place. In our case, they would need to agree to that, knowing we would be treating patients without their supervision. المهندس أشرف suggested we talk to Dr. Madani, who had given us our course. It is illegal for a doctor to license a clinic without being there to supervise or work. They could be fined more than 20,000 Egyptian pounds or around $1,200 and jail. Dr. Madani called a lawyer who had helped him set up his clinics.
احنا الاثنين مش اطباء بس هيبقى معانا دكتور محمد مدني يعني هو اللي هيبقى شغال معانا مثلا يومين في الاسبوع.
مفيش مشكله احنا بنرخص باسم.
Talking about the need to fight against corruption in Egypt.
هدفنا كلنا هو المواطن رقم 1 رقم 2 إنهاء الفساد في الجهات الحكومية ومساعدة الجهات
On his Facebook page, he says he provides legal services.
في حالة إن الرخصة باسم الدكتور وهو مش المدير دي مشكلة؟ غير دكتور محمد.
هيشتغل في مكان الشيفت كله مين يشتغل؟ لازم لو لقيت تحقيقي دي مشكلة. أي حاجة على لازم يبقى
أيوة بس احنا كنا بنفكر بعد مرحلة ما لازم.
فيها في لجنة جاية. في تطبيق وتعرف وفي بجد.
The lawyer was offering to alert us to some potential inspections by the private treatment department. If they went ahead and arranged this license for our clinic, knowing that we were unqualified and would be working there unsupervised, Mr. Abu al-Azm and Dr. Madani's actions would be in violation. Today, they are meeting with Dr. George Nashid from the Doctors Syndicate to put in an official complaint against Dr. Mina.
كانت المفروض هتعمل شفط دهون من أنهي مناطق؟
كل المناطق فيها شفط دهون.
لا علاقة لأي طبيب بيه أنا يعني بس بقول علشان أي مريض بيعمل عملية وارد إن يجيله جلطة وسد رئوية. عشان كده واضح إنه يعني لا النيابة هتلاقي نقطة ولا يعني هي دي مشكلة القصة كلها. لكن هل في خطأ فني من عدمه ده اللي احنا هنحاول نستبينه؟ لكن بالنسبة للنيابة مفيش ورقة أدين بيها حد.
A few months after we visited the Doctors Syndicate, We met with Dr. Gamal Amira, the head of its ethics committee, without talking about
العملية اللي هو عملها وهحاسبه على الورق اللي موجود في المستشفيات ونقارنها بأقوال الطبيب ونقارنها بأقوال أهل المريضة. يا ريت يكون للنقابة من القوانين ما يسمح لها برضك.
The danger, the conflict is coming closer, and a feeling here now that nowhere is safe.
In-depth programming on BBC World News.
I want to talk to you about the politics of this. Did she not think she was going to get that question?
It's important to remember that this is a negotiation.
Archbishop Tutu is well underway all over South Africa.
There's more trouble here in the Netherlands. Small groups of people destroying things in the northern city of Groningen.
The clashes are taking place just a few hundred meters away from where I'm standing.
Claimed at least 14 lives overnight. You had people rushing to their basements.
We break stories from more places than any other international news broadcaster. We are the leaders in global breaking news.
You're watching BBC World News with me, Tim Wolf.
We hope that the Parliament will confirm the decision to apply for NATO membership during the coming days.
We'll have the view from a former Finnish Prime Minister. President Biden says America must do everything to end hate-filled collapse, sparked widespread anger against the political elite. And a triumphant Ukraine wins this year's Eurovision Song Contest in Italy, the membership applications to NATO on Wednesday. Well, it comes as the head of NATO says Turkey has made it clear it won't block Sweden and Finland's potential bids to join, following talks between foreign ministers that concluded in Berlin on Sunday. NATO's secretary
in a quick and speedy process.
How long would it take to ratify Finland and Sweden to become full members of NATO? And what would happen if there was some Russian aggression before they were fully ratified?
Interim period after application, but before all parliaments have ratified. We can, for instance, look into the possibility of increased NATO military presence in the Baltic region.
He had to say.
Allies were joined here in Berlin by the foreign ministers from Sweden and Finland. Both countries are close and valued defense partners of NATO and the United States. And the United States would strongly support a NATO application, supported NATO's open door policy, and the right of all countries to decide their own futures, their policies, their security arrangements.
I've also been speaking to Finland's former Prime Minister, Alexander Stubb, and he said he thought his country
joined the European Union and forged a close partnership with NATO and made ourselves as NATO compatible as possible. So it took 30 years basically from the end of the Cold War now then for us to take the final decision to join NATO. I've been in favor of it for the past. Probably we should have joined already in '95, but had we organized a referendum, it would have been yes for the EU, no for NATO. 2008 could have been a second possibility. I was foreign minister at the time, mediated peace in Georgia and suggested...
Through, it seems certain it will go through. But what about the consequences of this? Russia says it's a mistake, that there will be military, economic consequences.
Well, no, I don't think so. We prepared for this moment for a long time.
Turkish terrorists. What are you going to do about that?
We're not too worried about that. And actually, there were some corrective statements coming from Erdogan's advisor later on during that day. I think the references were basically to Kurdish minority collected. Don't worry about these things too much and predict that we'll be in NATO within the next few months.
Interesting, isn't it? When you look at your reservist numbers, you look at the training, the exercises you've done, the preparations that Sweden has carried out.
62 F-18s, just bought another 64 F-35s. The missile systems, the artillery joint exercises, and to add on to that, of course, we participated in most NATO operations, including KFOR in Kosovo and then Afghanistan. First of all, the harassment has actually been quite small, but you could say that, Russia could use previously two leverages. One was military and the other one was the last question that you posed, economy. But the economic one is gone now because of the sanctions regime, and, we've of trade with them, you're gonna lose.
Alexander Stubb, a former Finnish Prime Minister from 2014 to 2015. Now, an 18-year-old man has appeared in court charged with murder after 10 people were killed in a shooting. Of the 13 people shot, 11 were black. Police said the gunman, Peyton Gendron, live-streamed the killings. He's suspected of being a white supremacist. Neda Taufik has this report from New York.
A busy grocery store in a predominantly black community. This was the shooter's intended target. The horror started immediately in the parking lot. As the gunman emerged from his car, heavily armed and wearing tactical gear, he shot 4 people, killing 3 of them. The shooter then returned fire, killing the security guard. The entire horrific episode of people being killed in cold blood in the store was streamed live online. The suspect was taken into custody alive after putting his gun to his neck.
Extremism. A white supremacist who has engaged in an act of terrorism and will be prosecuted as such in a cold-hearted, cruel...
The toxic mix of guns and racism has ended their neighbors' lives in an instant. Neda Taufik, BBC News, New York.
Well, for more on this, let's speak to Susan Cork. She is the Intelligence Project incident in the United States. Of course, we've seen others right around the world, in New Zealand as well. What evidence is there at the moment, as far as you've managed to decipher, of links to a broader white supremacist organisation?
We have also been able to see things from his online history that point to signs of radicalization through participation in online groups. We have not yet seen evidence that he was affiliated with a specific far-righter or racist group worth of planning. By his own accounts, he was radicalized through his participation in online racist communities. And, he was frequently sharing racist memes and trafficking in a range of it. And then on Discord, he also pre-attack had a very racist rant. There were plenty of red flags online in both, kind of the more obscure, more racist white supremacists.
How many groups are there in your knowledge, and is the number increasing?
The number is not increasing, but that is not because there is a decline of the fault falls at the feet of Trump, who normalized this idea of violence, Tucker Carlson and Fox for profiting off explicit endorsement of the guy who are, in the Republican Party. So it is embracing violence more openly. We tracked in 2021 733 hate groups across the United States, and additionally some...
Very much indeed for joining us.
So much.
British military intelligence believes that Russia has lost a third of the ground forces it used to invade Ukraine. The latest report from the Ministry of Defence claims that Moscow's offensive has lost momentum. Lviv.
It's hard to believe that anyone still survives in the ruins of Azovstal. An incendiary bombardment raining fire down on the last Ukrainian defenders. But hundreds, maybe even more than 1,000 fighters
to sneak to a Ukrainian-controlled area. We don't recognise the Donetsk People's Republic.
But it's not just civilians leaving the ruins of Mariupol. Russia appears to be drawing troops away from the siege and into the fight for the Donbass. And you owe...
We are no strangers to sanctions. They were almost always there in one form or another. What is surprising is the absolutely cavernous Russophobic surge that has occurred in all so-called civilized countries.
But
closed in Lebanon, where people have been voting in the first parliamentary election since an unprecedented financial collapse fueled new anger and distrust of the political elite that has ruled the country now for decades. The devastating explosion in Beirut in 2020 deepened the...
As well, there's been a real focus on the turnout. Only 48% of people voted in 2018, but so much has changed since then. The financial crisis in this country, the port explosion, as you were saying, here in Beirut. What you can see this evening is the beautiful Corniche establishment, in a way, away from the main parties.
Right.
What is it about traditional politics, traditional parties, that you and other people have pulled away from?
Well, basically, it's the sectarian base that these traditional political parties are sectarian/secular, and that's our main fight today, is to really have our system be sectarian-free, because we believe that it is the main thing that has caused the collapse of our economy.
Frustrated with the state of the country, they still vote along sectarian lines, don't they? So how do you pull people away from that?
Well, actually, I think since 2015, people have started to realize the importance of having a state that really operates and functions in a very efficient way. Originally, people, because of the weak government and state, have been depending more on themselves to provide the services and the kind of healthcare and all the kind of infrastructure that they need, a better understanding of the kind of state that they need. And since that time, gradually people have been moving away from traditional parties up to the 17 October uprising, where people really went down in millions to the street to demonstrate against the crisis and the port explosion. Now, people have really now total disbelief in the current system.
And you have been on your phone, waiting to find out what is going to happen. Obviously, power will...
I think we could hope for having a number of seats in the parliament, maybe to start as some kind of an anti-establishment bloc within the new parliament, and this will have much more credibility with people and allow us more.
No.
I'm sure we will. I'm sure things have already been changing. People have been shifting away from the establishment and looking for other political alternatives, and that's by its own really it defies all the political history of the country since the
picture emerges. As we were saying there, the hopes of significant political change are low, but it will be interesting, really fascinating to see the message that the people of Lebanon have sent to the political class as they voted today.
Anna Foster, song Stefania, which was sung in Ukrainian.
183 points.
He did so well. There it is.
Well, Britain ended its disappointing run of results with Sam Ryder, you've just seen there. He came second. Just before we go, a pair of rare pangolins have made their debut at Prague Zoo in the Czech Republic. A male called Guobao and a female called Wu Hao Tang were unveiled to the public after a month Instead, there we are on that note. From me and the team, see you soon.
And wet weather around here. We will continue to do that as we look at the forecast going into Monday, also into parts of Sri Lanka and Bangladesh. Worth noting that in northeast India and into Assam in particular, looking particularly wet with the risk of flooding. Now through much Pakistan, northwest India, again the worst of that intense heat just easing a touch, though temperatures staying at or above average for the time of year and building higher again later in the week. So the rain across southern parts of India and into Sri Lanka, a few showers.
Straight.
In Afghanistan, the Taliban are growing increasingly hard-line with new rules on what women can wear. Meanwhile, the humanitarian situation remains dire and attacks by the local branch of the Islamic State group have been spiking.
Cost of living is impacting millions of lives daily. Climate change, the COVID pandemic, and now the unfolding conflict in Ukraine have disrupted supply chains and exacerbated the rise in prices, leaving people on the edge of crisis. To find out more, join us for our global cost.
Hello, you're watching BBC World News. Our headlines. Sweden and Finland have confirmed they will apply for NATO membership, ending decades of military non-alignment. The Finnish President, Sauli Niinistö, called his country's decision historic. The collapse fuelled new anger against the political elite that has long ruled the country. Analysts say that there is little expectation, though, the poll will bring a major shift in the power structure. And President Volodymyr Zelensky said Ukraine's music had swept Europe as he
has come from, plus soaring energy and living costs, higher interest rates, and not to mention a global staffing shortage and a war in Europe. Lots of hurdles. So I'm going to be discussing the road back for the global travel industry with the head of the World Travel and Tourism Council, known as Make a Comeback. We talked to Arnold Donald, who runs Carnival Corporation. That's the biggest cruise operator on the planet. Passengers. They were held for 2 weeks as the virus spread throughout the ship, infecting more than 700 on board. Shortly after, the world closed down and the tourism industry suffered the worst crisis in its history. Take a look at this. This was the heart of Venice activity, or roughly 10% of the entire global economy. 1 in 10 jobs on the planet were in travel and tourism. But COVID dealt it a hammer blow, and as the world shut down, business fell by a half in 2020. That's more than double the numbers from the January before. But it's not all plain sailing. The global economy faces some mighty challenges, which travel and tourism will have to deal with. Rising fuel costs as a result of the war in Ukraine is one big issue for the make borrowing more expensive. And COVID restrictions in China, they're certainly another worry for the industry. Before the pandemic, Chinese tourists were the most valuable in the world, spending $250 billion traveling abroad in 2019. Came the war in Ukraine. Much of the travel and tourism industry, they've withdrawn business from Russia. Airbnb, Expedia and Carnival Corporation, they've all ceased operations. But some airlines from the Gulf and China, they're still flying to Russia. And some websites in Ukraine, it's pushed up fuel costs. I mean, energy costs are soaring at the moment. How are airlines and other travel companies, which were already in financial difficulties just dealing with the pandemic, how are they now going to cope with these higher costs?
I was affected by about 3.4%. So we've certainly been one of the sectors that have suffered the most, and probably, you know, hotels and airlines have been the front row of taking that kind of a punish. Travel, whether you're in the US or whether you're in China, has been very, very strong. But people now want to travel abroad and see the world again. That wanderlust is still there. It's part of our human nature. And all the numbers that we are
returning, but now they're returning at a time when we know consumers around the world, they're facing rising prices in everything, heating, food, just general living costs. I'm wondering, do your members think that that's going to at least depress some bookings?
Well, I think, bookings, I was just looking recently at the bookings from the UK. I know we're talking today globally, but just from the UK, the number of bookings have gone up 300%, threefold this year compared.
At your time. Thanks for joining me, and I'll talk to you soon.
As ever, Aaron, it's been a pleasure. Bye-bye.
At the end of 2020, in the midst of the pandemic, Airbnb, it listed its shares on the Nasdaq Stock Exchange in New York. And despite the concerns over the was worth more than $100 billion. Millions of people around the world use the company to let out or rent short-term accommodation. So what can they tell us about the state of the travel and tourism industry right now? Well, to find out, I caught up with the big boss, the co-founder. We're going to have to react to Russia's invasion.
So the moment Ukraine was invaded, the first question we asked is, how can we help? And it was obvious. What we can do is mobilize our host community to provide housing for Ukraine refugees in need. And so we announced within days of the invasion, people in our community started booking hosts in Ukraine, hosts they never intended to stay with, just to make a donation to them, to be able to help them. And within like weeks of the invasion, generosity of our community.
Given you were one of the first companies to stop operating in Russia, I'm wondering, what do you say to those companies who are still advertising hotels and holidays there?
Some things are just more important than your business. And if they're truly meaningful, they'll come back. And I think that travel is one of the most important, meaningful things in our life. Travel is what we do. Like when we graduate, when we get married, when we retire, people had all the money in the world, probably one of the first things they would do with that money was to spend time with people you care about and see the world.
As we know, Brian, there are still high COVID infection rates in countries like India, South Africa, even the United States, just among a few others. But are you seeing much global variation in the region?
And Korea, China, these are not yet in full throttle yet. And it's really because these markets are very much cross-border markets. A lot of the travel within Asia is somebody leaving one country and going to the other. And because of there's still the infection rates and the fact that a lot of people aren't crossing. Let me just put this in perspective. We were nearly break even on a net profit basis in the first quarter, the last 3 months, in low season. And we did $1.2 billion in free cash flow. So if you just follow the seasonality, yes, I think that we're going to do really well in companies, because most of our hosts don't think of their listings like a supply chain. The way you should think about it is most of our hosts rent the homes they live in or their second home. These homes they didn't buy to rent. And so their Airbnb income is supplemental homes to stay with groups.
Airbnb's growth, it hasn't pleased everyone, as you know. I mean, there is a view that in some areas, the increase in Airbnb lettings might be making it harder for local populations to find longer-term rental properties. Do you reckon?
Laws and regulations, cities will put in things like nights restrictions that limit the number of nights you can book. But the other thing, just to show you that we're trying to do something about it, today, we announced the biggest change to Airbnb in a decade, our product. In our product, part of what we're trying to do, we're going to the same place at the same date. And so we're trying to do something about it. We'll see if it works, but that's our attempt.
Is there a danger, Brian, of overextending, just getting too big too fast?
I think there is a danger of trying to do too many things too quickly. And we did that before the pandemic. But we got really lean, we got really focused, and we are an incredibly focused company right now. And I think that the business and the results really point to that.
Your European headquarters are in Dublin, in Ireland, and no doubt, Brian, you enjoy their low years. You've had the billion guests arrivals. When you were starting out, could you have predicted numbers like that?
It's funny you asked me that question. I've been reflecting a lot of that kind of stuff. You can't dream of something you haven't been exposed to. My parents are social workers. To me, a business was a pizza shop. I could never imagine the scale we've uncovered, but everything in the world that's big eventually, starts small, and Airbnb was very.
कल आज और कल में देश के हर पल में कल आज और कल में देश के मुश्किलें कोई हरदम साथ निभाते हैं कल आज और कल में रहते हैं देश के हर पल में रहते हैं
1956 से आज तक LIC हर पल आपके साथ।
I'm very interested in the connection between people, and I love the fact that people see that in the book, that it's about our shared humanity.
Every time I think about what he saw and what he went through, it makes me feel so sad.
Just extraordinary. Whatever their method, they only had one chance to get that right.
Inspiring arts and culture on BBC World News.
Ships were confined to harbours all around the world. But with so much pent-up demand from passengers, is cruising set for a comeback? Well, all the biggest players in the industry, they've just been meeting in Miami for the first time since COVID. And my colleague, Lucy...
All-time high. In 2019, 30 million people took cruises. They are now expecting that number to be exceeded by the end of 2023. And all the routes are opening up as well, 70% of them. Alaska and Canada have just announced that their reos here in Miami have said they really don't ever want to see again these headlines that talk about floating petri dishes. So what they put in place in terms of COVID protocols is rigorous. Vaccinations, monitoring, testing when you're on board as well. And the relationship...
And the reason is because we're coming back. So we'll have all of our ships sailing by the end of this year. We're looking at a path to positive earnings in the third quarter, after almost 2 years of generating losses. Taxi drivers, small restaurants, tour operators, etc. It's a huge economic multiplier that we represent.
If you've never cruised before, but you've seen some negative headlines about what happened during the pandemic, what would you say to convince someone?
We have a very low incidence of any cases of COVID, so we haven't had any major outbreaks on any ships. When people have had COVID, because they're vaccinated or boosted, etc., they aren't super sick, so they're not really sick. It hasn't been disrupted, which there can be because there's COVID in society overall.
How is the war in Ukraine affecting the industry?
First of all, concerning the invasion of Ukraine, our heart goes out to everybody impacted, and it's a terrible thing. How the challenge, but really we have over 3,000 Ukrainian crew members and 1,000 Russian crew members, and just seeing how those people's lives are impacted. And so we stand for peace. We provided a ship.
Your biggest expenses?
Fuel is certainly one of our largest expenses.
Is it impacting your profits?
What we focus on is fuel consumption for two reasons. First, because we want to lower our emission footprint, and secondly, because it's a cost savings. And so we very much focus on maybe one other country, but whatever we did in those places were for the people. And so we don't just say we didn't profit from that. It kept people having income that otherwise would not have had income because we would have, had to. People may have asked, very few people ask me directly, and I would never try to justify. That's for the board to do. The board determines my compensation, and they can say why they pay me whatever they pay me. I'm comfortable with what I'm paid with, what I've been paid. Compensation was dramatically reduced and should have been, and I have no problems with that. And then as we come back, we have a very large business and creating real value for the shareholders, and we fought to keep value for the shareholders.
Arnold, thank you very much.
Thank you, Lucy. Thank you.
Economy. A land of excellence and achievement, shaping our future. Where expertise drives our world each time further. Wallonia, the land of almond butter.
Hello, it's time now for another whirlwind trip around the world of weather. We'll start off in North America. This is how things are shaping up recently in terms of the satellite picture, where we've been seeing some wet weather, a swirl in the cloud in Canada, low pressure pushing east. It will provide for some very wet conditions across into the northeast USA, into New England, heating up across southern parts of the USA, building temperature in Texas, Dallas near 40 degrees Celsius by the time we get to Tuesday. Much cooler weather is pushing north across a large part of South America with Europe, and it's close to this, and particularly to the north of it, temperatures are a bit below average for the time of year, whereas elsewhere in Europe there is widespread warmth. Mainly dry across northern parts of Africa, showers and thunderstorms central areas, another hot day in Cape Town on Tuesday. Middle East, the strong winds we've been having in places with lifted dust, all beginning to settle down. A little weather front with some cloud and maybe again a little bit of dust moving its way southwards, just dipping the temperature briefly before it rises again. The heat that we've had, that awful heat wave in Pakistan, chilly weather behind that. This zone of Australia with a couple of days of heavy rain brings a risk of flooding from Tuesday. Still wet and windy at times in Tasmania, and another rain-bearing weather front moving northwards through New Zealand into the North Island.